give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is Tim Brayton. Hello, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Brennan. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm awake. I'm ready to talk about this movie that I hope you knew I was going to despise going into it, and thus softened the blow.
Certainly did not.
Okay, cool. Wonderful.
I was actually I was taken aback by your Letterboxd review.
So was I. Look, I mean, because I read, we're talking about 1972's Tombs of the Blind Dead. This is the second entry in our zombie month. Tombs of the Blind Dead has taken on this kind of legendary status for me because you reviewed all the Blind Dead films, like a decade ago or something?
2009.
Okay,
long time ago.
Yeah, but to me, it's like the ancient texts of Tim, and this is like my first foray into this particular film, which has achieved this kind of legendary status because you liked it so much, over a decade ago. So it's always been in the back of my mind as something to check out, and I have now, and well,
we'll get there. That'll be the course of this extraordinarily sad episode.
Yes, I think we'll talk about it, but
we'll talk about it.
Yep. Okay. How about you give us the plot of Tombs of the Blind Dead, insofar as there is one, but it's
there's totally a plot of Tombs of the Blind Dead. It is not even a little bit opaque, I would say. So, in Lisbon, Portugal, we meet two women who are encountering each other. Their names are Betty and Virginia. Betty is played by Lona Fleming, and Virginia is played by Maria Elena Arpon, appearing under the name Helen Harp.
They sure do encounter each other.
They sure do encounter each other. They're at a pool. They are like bikini wearing. It's all very like sexy and flirty, and it turns out to actually be literally flirty because, as we shortly discover, they were lovers in college. And at this point, Virginia is now dating a man named Roger Whelan, played by Cesar Berner. And Virginia invites Betty to go on the train with them, basically. And so they get on the train.
Oh, no, Roger invites her, because it's...
Roger invites her, that's right, that's it. Right, that's right. So he's kind of flirting with her, and it's all very fraught, and there's this, like, weirdly shaped triangle in which... It's more like a sort of like a recycling arrow, kind of, if that makes sense. Like Roger's trying to hit on Betty, and Betty's trying to rekindle things with Virginia, and Virginia's just trying to make it work with Roger. And so they're on a train together, and at a certain point, Roger's sort of pestiness gets so intense that things come to a head, and this ends with Virginia basically jumping off the train and running off in a huff. And the other two are very shocked and don't know what to do about this. So Virginia goes to the nearest sign of any sort of human habitation, because she's now wandering through the Portugal wilderness. And she finds this sort of ruined castle-type looking thing. And she gets there. She sort of pokes around. It's all very creepy and lonely and isolated, but she doesn't really have anything else to do. So she prepares to go to sleep that night and presumably figure out what to do in the morning. And what should happen to her, except obviously, as will occur when you are in a movie called Tombs of the Blind Dead, she is attacked by mummies in robes, and they kill her and eat her. And the rest of the movie, and this happens 30 minutes, 25 minutes in.
Yeah, they're pulling a Marion Crane.
Yeah, they're pulling a Marion Crane. They are... So the rest of the movie... Betty and Roger, her body's found very, very shortly, and Betty and Roger trying to figure out like what the hell happened in those ruins, like what's going on there. So they spend a large chunk of the middle just trying to figure out what's going on, and they, at the end of this process, encounter a legend of the terrible thing that happened many centuries ago to a group of Knights Templar in the English dub and the subtitles, although apparently they're never referred to as such in the Spanish version. They're just like the Knights.
Yeah, and
but
Knights Back from the Orient, specifically.
Knights Back from the Orient. So they've come back from the Crusades or whatever they've come from. That doesn't seem to really be pinned down to anything specifically, but as we learn, they came back with Egyptian immortality magic, basically. And we're now sort of jumping pretty far into the movie, so I don't want to go too far into it, although the fact that it's called Tombs of the Blind Dead is a bit of a tell for what's up with these particular knights. But suffice it to say, the two main characters figure out what's going on and then go back to the ruins to try and solve things once and for all. And of course the mummies are there waiting for them when that happens.
Yeah, and ... Yeah, and as we all know, ancient Egypt had a very close relationship with Satan and the dark mass, so that is obviously very helpful in this situation.
And, to me, that is in the spirit of Italian genre movies, and I know this is a Spanish genre movie, but it wants to be an Italian movie. That's where its heart is.
Oh, absolutely.
There's just a sort of, fraught, overwrought, just throw all the mythology at it. If it feels right, it'll make sense sort of vibe.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. And also, some of the gravestones are Egyptian onks, and it's I don't think you know what's going on with this.
They don't, but they don't care because it looks
exactly. And I guess that's where we should start, because I think ultimately the thing that gets you fully on board with this movie is a thing that I don't think is bad in any way, but is not a thing that is capable of getting me fully on board with the movie, which is essentially the look of, let's say, the locations and the monster.
I would call those in I'm not sure what order my two favorite things about this movie.
Yes, and I would not argue that either of those things are bad. I just don't know that they are enough to get me on board with the rest of the thing that the movie is doing. So I did want to put that on the table first.
Okay.
I would say, so let's talk about the location. Because I believe it was an abandoned monastery, which is where they shot.
It feels like an abandoned monastery, certainly.
Yeah, if I read the credits correctly, which were in Spanish, I believe it's a monastery.
Okay.
But yeah, so I do think it's a great location. It does have this kind of ancient, cobwebby, dusty, crumbling glory to it. And I think that is quite a good thing. But I would just say that I don't know. I can be won over by a location. I think this location, it's a little too, most of the different parts of it look the same as the other parts, even though they all look creepy.
Okay.
And for me, I did like looking at it, but I got a little tired of looking at it after 15 minutes.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not going to dispute that all the parts of the location look sort of like all the other parts of the location, which I would say is probably accurate to the experience of a medieval monastery that has not been used for some centuries and is now just a pile of stone.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not saying it's inaccurate.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I take the point while also not understand. I don't want to say not understanding. I don't know personally what the version of this that didn't do that would look like.
No, you're right. And, that's not a hill I'm willing to die on as far as criticism. It's just
okay.
And I think maybe that kind of architecture feels more exotic to someone from the Midwest. And I'm not saying we have these giant crumbling monasteries where I live, but a lot of our architecture is influenced by, Spanish and Portuguese and otherwise kind of Western European architecture out here, because we were built by Mexican people who were taken over by Spanish people, so we have a lot of that influence here, so it feels a little less exotic to see that kind of design for me.
I wouldn't say that exotic is what the appeal is, though. It's the ruined.
Okay, I get that.
I would almost have assumed that because it is a familiar style to you, it would have hit harder, because the idea of it being a sort of ancient ruin would feel more directly comparable to what it looks like not in a state of ruin. And obviously that's not what happened. Mm-hmm. That sort of would have been my expectation. But no, I mean, because for me the appeal of it is very much this movie works for me in the way that like a very tacky but very enthusiastic haunted house does, where it's like full of just things that are creepy. It's just a movie that is going overboard in some ways on like creepy imagery, and I just like the sort of loneliness of it. I like the way that you can more or less figure out what the spaces are, but it's not even like, oh, this is like we're walking through an old room in an ancient building. It's like we're walking through what was a room and has not been a room for at least 100 years. Like that kind of thing. It's like it has really only the simulation left of being a kind of actual habitable space. It's really just walls. Occasionally they're in a roofed area, but it's that very, very ancient feeling to it. And, you know, in text, it's been 500 years. I have no idea when the monastery is actually abandoned in the world, but that's, I think, what I really attend to in it, is that profound ruined feeling.
Okay, I get that. That didn't strike me in the same way that it struck you, and that, you know, that's just subjectivity.
Right.
Like, I think the strongest location for me is the like fully lurid Mario Bava set of the Mannequin Factory.
The Mannequin Factory is also a superb thing.
I think there is like there is no way for me to fully dislike a movie that has that hallway that's full of mannequins and being lit by a flashing cherry red light above.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is like if the Mannequin Factory weren't already good enough, and of course mannequins always work. They're one of those things that like any cheap hack horror filmmaker can be like, well, mannequins are just creepy.
Yep.
Like naked armless mannequins are going to be creepy, period. But so if that's not already enough of a like just boom of like that sort of overheated Giallo-esque imagery, the fact that it is bathed in red is like, okay, now you're just flat out cheating, and it works.
Yeah, and it's so well. It's unmotivated lighting to the point that they actually do give a reason for it in the script. They're like, oh, there's a neon sign above us. But
because there's a neon sign factory upstairs, if I recall correctly,
something like that, and they're next to the morgue. It's a really interesting area of town.
It's fascinating to go on a little bit of an aside. I feel like if this was a Mario Bava film, they would have just done it.
Oh, yeah.
He would have been like, well, it's a Mannequin Factory. Why wouldn't it be bathed in cherry red light? And I do feel, even though this has a really, really strong Italian vibe, it is, again, not an Italian film. It's a Spanish-Portuguese co-production. And I do get that sense that they feel like it has to be grounded in real human existence in a way that maybe not quite by 72, but certainly pretty quickly the Italian directors of horror films were like, whatever.
Yeah.
Who gives a shit if it makes any sense? We're just going to throw imagery at you. And I don't think Armando de Osorio, the writer-director of this film, is quite willing to go to that level of just like phantasmagoria. Like, I think he still is trying to... He wants the movie to make sense.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of my roadblock with it, in the sense of I know how to read an Italian horror film, and this it's shaped like one, but it's not one. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, like in Suspiria, when Susie Banion's wandering down a hallway, it's not like, oh well, this room is green because whatever, you know, it's just happening, and it's gorgeous, and everything is like that.
This is an ongoing point of friction between my boyfriend and I. He saw Suspiria before he ever met me, which I wish I could go back in time and change that, so I could have prepared him better. But he routinely, when I am singing the praises of Italian horror generally, or Suspiria specifically, brings up the question of why there's a room in this dance academy that is nothing but like a layer of barbed wire covering the ground.
Witches.
And that's what I'm always like, why would the witches not have a barbed wire room? And so this is a sticking point for him, that it doesn't make sense that this room is there. And if you've gotten that far into Suspiria and you have like if you've been vibing with Suspiria until that scene, I don't know why that scene is what throws you.
Or if you've gotten to that point in Suspiria and you're like, everything else I've seen makes perfect sense.
Right. Right.
I can track this plot from A to B to C, baby.
So I do certainly.
So she shined a mirror in her eyes to make magnets fall from the ceiling.
It's I don't know, but no. So I do think that that's a very good point. Is that like it is. It's not. I don't even know what adjective to use really, but like there is a degree to which I think I could see that being interpreted as like a sign of the movie's lack of confidence in itself, or it's just lack of sort of ingenuity or visionary inspiration or whatnot. Because it does not have that, like, we're just going to go for it.
Yeah, like, I think that scene, I don't mind that specific element of the light being called out, but I do think that it is like a microcosm of what's happening in the rest of the movie.
Exactly. I think the rest of the movie is that.
Yeah, where it's just like, it's a little, this is, like I said, it's hard to find the right word, but it's mundane in the sense of it is on our plane of existence.
The other thing that sort of directly leaps to mind as an example of this is when they're trying to find out what happened in this monastery centuries ago. In an Italian movie, they would have like gone to the local, department of ancient monk mummies at the university, and they would have the first person they would have talked to would have given them like a 40-minute monologue about
it would have been Udo Kier.
Here they're like going from one local to another, and they're getting like, oh, I mean, there's something about those ruins, I don't know, and they have to keep like finding people, and it's like the fourth person they talk to finally ends up being like a professor of antiquities who can explain what's going on. But I feel like that's, as you say, it's mundane, and that is probably one of the things about the movie that I don't love, is that it does feel like the middle, the let's solve the mystery part of it is too long.
Yeah, and the thing is, well, especially, Dario Argento, he wouldn't have solved the mystery, and it wouldn't have mattered.
That's actually quite correct, yes.
Yeah, or it's like, okay, so you got some zombies, and they're blind. Like, you could throw in that they're old Templars or whatever, but we don't need the whole thing. It is grounded in this, like, obviously very diffuse and silly mythology, but very clearly laid out and detailed mythology that they've built.
Right. Oh, we get a flashback. We learn exactly where the monks came from and why.
Oh boy, the flashback.
Oh, you didn't like the flashback?
It's fine. It is very lurid and Jess Franco-y in the way that this film keeps fainting towards being a Jess Franco movie and then doesn't in a way that really is strange to me.
That's, I get that, because there's definitely, there's a very, like, female vampire-y sort of mood to a lot of the way that the plot sort of evolves.
Yeah, because it's one of those films, like, especially from the way that everything else in the movie is just the random scenes where it's like, okay, here's two girls in a boarding school kissing, or here are some undead knights. Or no, I guess they're in the flashback.
They're alive.
Yeah, they're alive
at
that point, and they're sucking the blood out of the breasts of a virgin, which
I'm hearing is not a scene that worked for you.
I think it's very funny.
And I think that's too bad.
But the thing is, I feel like the movie doesn't commit to that energy. Because that level of nonsense, I would really be able to swallow if that's the movie I was watching, but it keeps just kind of randomly appearing, and then the rest of the movie, except for...
I think I would push back against it being random, because I think when it shows up, there's always... Unless you're thinking of more examples than I am, but I think that there are narrative reasons why it shows up when it does.
Yeah, there are narrative reasons.
Like the flashback is a payoff to 50 minutes of like sort of teasing us about what's going on.
Yes, but the tease is so fucking boring, Tim. And I know we don't have the same the way that our brains process that kind of visual information are extremely different. Like, you watch the Bellatar films and whatnot.
I do watch the Bellatar films and whatnot. I was going to say, we have not yet gotten to, I think, what will be our single biggest point of contention, and we'll have to at some point, but we're not there.
I'm curious what you think it's going to be, and I bet you're right, but we'll see.
Well, we'll see. No, I do like the way that after this kind of language stretch of people talking, people asking questions, people like trying to find information and not getting it, that it does kind of finally spill out in this kind of extremely tacky but also weirdly like brutal torture and, as you say, sucking the blood out of a virgin's breasts sequence, which is, you know, it is very tawdry in a way that I don't think anything else in this movie is. Even the scene of the boarding school girls kissing, I feel, is not as just like crass.
Yes, that is true.
As the flashback is, and I like that about it. I like that sort of very just in your face meanness of it. Like it's very blunt, and I think it works. I think it works for the movie to have something blunt happen at that point.
Yeah, I would say so. Okay, maybe here's what it is. So I think anything that's that way about this movie exists in scenes that seem separate from the actual meat of the movie. Like I would say that the people being stalked by zombies in this crumbling ruin, those scenes to me are less lurid than anything that happens in the flashback and anything that happens in the final 10 minutes of the movie.
And that's fair. And I think to me the fact that the lurid moments are segregated in flashbacks feels like a strategy that works.
It is a strategy.
I think we agree that it's a strategy.
And that's totally fair. How did we get here? We were talking about
I don't know. I'm just gonna go and stream of consciousness on this one. Which I feel is kind of how the movie goes.
Yeah, very much.
I will say, since we're talking about that flashback, you and I both watched the 101 minute Spanish cut.
Yes.
In Spanish, if I'm not mistaken, there is what is called a hybrid cut that's been kicking around for a little while, where it uses all of the English dub that exists and then fills in the rest with Spanish. That's, I think, a silly way to watch it.
That's very silly.
There's also an 83-minute cut, I think, just called The Blind Dad. That was the first version released in English. It makes this change and that change. It generally backs off on the gore and blood. But one of the big changes it makes, and I haven't seen this cut since 2009, so my memories are not incredibly strong, but I am pretty sure it does this. It puts the flashback to the Templars first. That is, the movie opens with an explanation of what's going on there.
So they had no confidence. What? That's so silly. That's so American.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Also, I don't know how apocryphal or not this is, but I did read that one of the recuts of this film was called Revenge from Planet Ape. And it was meant to tie in with Planet of the Apes, and it had an opening introduction that was basically like, okay, so there are a bunch of ape humans on the planet, and that's what these zombies are. Go.
I mean, I have not seen the footage personally, but my understanding is that a DVD release of this film has that opening as a bonus feature. So I'm pretty sure it's not apocryphal. I think it's
okay.
real.
Hell yeah, because that is the most Italian thing about the movie. Of just like absolute bug shit nonsense in its international distribution.
Let me ask you this question: would you have enjoyed it more if you had encountered it as a Planet of the Apes movie?
Maybe, because that's so wild. But yeah, well, let's talk about the zombies.
Let's talk about the zombies, because they are very important to me, and it does not sound like they are very important to you.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
No.
Okay. I think I do not think the zombies look bad. I think they look best in still images from the film. And in motion, they're mostly fine. I would say their hands are extremely silly and most of the time clearly just a rigid hand on a stick that is being moved not by, a being that possesses this arm, but by somebody holding a stick. But the general idea of the way that their faces look and the way that the kind of added element of kind of the monks' robes interact with each other, I think that's generally a good image.
No, I cannot disagree with you that the hands look like hands on sticks. I disagree that that is a problem, honestly. But we'll get there in a second. But yeah, what I love about these is that De Osorio never called this a zombie movie. He always insisted it was like a mummy movie, basically. And I think there's some merit to that because these are basically living mummies.
Yeah, they're sorry. Yeah.
They're skin stretched tight over bone is sort of what they look like the whole time.
Yeah, and the idea is something like technically we'll spoil the reveal. Like technically they're undead in a way because the Templars were hanged and had their eyes plucked out by crows, I think.
Yes.
But I think the idea is that maybe that they couldn't be killed and they're just subsisting in this ruined state upon blood, but they're kind of technically still alive and not necessarily undead.
I think whatever it is, it involves satanic magic.
Yes, absolutely. It's
But yes.
It's kind of like Grandpa from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre plus Egyptian Satan.
Basically, I like that comparison. But yeah, so there is this sort of like sense that they, as you say, they can't die, so they are just these sort of figures of pure malice. They have to, presumably, if they could constantly drink blood, they would be fine, but they can't, so they aren't. So they're just these like sort of tattered looking creatures in tattered looking robes. And I do actually really enjoy the lack of articulated movement, because I mean they're basically just like, they're not costumes, they're props basically, like are sort of being positioned and moved around from off camera. And I like that it adds this sort of completely inhuman feeling to their movement, where it's just like everything is stiff and everything is sort of very rigid and skeletal and feels inorganic. That to me adds to the sort of uncanny vibe of it.
Okay, I hear that. I will say, here's something that I know I disagree with you on, which is that I don't think that
There's a claim I have backed off from my original review. I'm not sure if it's the one you're about to make.
No, this is actually one from your Letterboxd, I think.
Okay.
Which is that I don't think... Oh, actually, no. Actually, it is from your original review. I don't think the fact that they are blind plays into this movie in any sort of valid way to... Not valid, but like in an interesting way.
We definitely disagree on that point.
Okay. Yes, because obviously...
How into the spoilers are we going to go?
Let's do it. Let's bust it open. We've been talking about this for a
The
while.
heartbeat scene is my favorite scene in any zombie movie.
Okay. The heartbeat scene is good, but there's never... I never in the film got a sense that they... I mean, they're blind in the way that Daredevil from the Marvel Comics is blind, which is that he can't see, but they basically can still see, just using their other senses. So it's not a challenge for them. Like they're never, like, if I recall, is there any scene where somebody? No, yeah, nobody. Sorry, there's not a moment where it's like, okay, you got to be very quiet and they won't see you. Like there's no way that to meaningfully interact with it.
That's the heartbeat scene.
Yes. I know, but the thing is that functionally they aren't blind. Like they can hear you and they get you, and that's just what happens. Like it's not an impediment to them.
Well, it wouldn't be. They've been living with it for 500 years, and they've gotten used to it at this point.
Yeah, but then like, it. Yes, the heartbeat scene is cool. I'm not trying to.
I think what I'm saying is that if the only payoff to them being blind is the heartbeat scene, that is sufficient payoff.
Okay. It seems strange to me to make a point out of it. When it's like, okay, sure, they're blind, but they also, don't have elbows. There's a lot of things wrong with them, or that should impede them that doesn't. It just didn't seem like an impressive hook to hang their.
I find it strange that someone who has watched as much horror and exploitation as I know that you have thinks that a tendentious hook that sounds cool in a title and maybe pays off in one scene is in some way invalidating for a horror movie.
Okay, well okay. This is me nitpicking because I don't find them very interesting. Like I said, they look nice, but they get on horses. They get off horses.
They do.
They kind of walk around a little bit, get back on the horses. Everything's in slow motion.
Everything's in slow motion.
And then they're on the horses, and that's in slow motion, and then they're riding the horses in slow motion, and then they ride the horses some more, and they don't do shit, Tim. They just ride horses.
So remember how I said there was a specific thing that I thought we might really distinctly disagree
This is
on?
the thing.
It is the slow motion.
Oh, it is.
I think the slow motion works so well.
It works for the first scene.
Well, I don't think you could only do it once, because I think the point is that when they move, this is what it looks like. It's a sort of ghostly, out of time, floating quality.
It is, but then they don't do anything. Like
they don't need to. It looks cool.
in my letterboxed takedown in the conversation in the comments, I said, "You will believe men can slowly dismount a horse." It's not thrilling.
When I read that, I knew where we were going to disagree, and I knew this was it. I love the slowness. It's what makes this movie for me.
I really appreciate you and respect you. But we just have different needs.
Clearly.
And I don't need things to be fast and rat-a-tat action all the time. I'm not a baby. But it is slow cinema at its finest, in that nothing's happening and it's taking a long time to happen.
It's like those nightmares where you run really hard and you pump your arms and legs as fast as you can, but it still feels like you're only going at like an extremely leisurely stroll. To me, it's that sort of like everything is sort of slow in this hostile, inexplicable way where like you cannot force it to go any faster. It's just going to kind of gradually sort of unspool across. And to me, that's just this constant. So it does that. It sort of does that in two ways. The Templars themselves, the zombies, move very slowly. They move in slow motion. I think even some of the footage of them like walking is in slow motion. It's harder to tell because one of the big cues when it's slow motion is that the horses look weird. But I do think there is this sense of just kind of this gradual inevitability. But there's also just like the plot moves slowly, and like when Virginia shows up in the ruins, there's like 8 minutes of her just poking around looking at shit.
Yeah,
and I hear in your voice, and I'm not surprised. This is how it goes. But to me, that's just 8 minutes of constant churning tension. Like it just gets more and more and more suspenseful until she finally gets eaten.
Oh, why?
Because it's mood. It's just this heavy, gloomy, threatening horror movie mood.
Okay. I think that must come from the ruination aspect that speaks to you and did not.
That's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. Yes.
Because it's like, all right, there's some ruins, there's some fucking sandstone. Oh, there's more. Okay, we got. Oh, there's an arch of sandstone.
And plus, while this is happening, there's that like sort of ugly scraping noise on the soundtrack.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it did feel like I was being mummified, and I think that's something that you want to happen. As your review of Mad God recently shows, you like a movie to imprison you and you to be.
Yes.
You like to give yourself over to the torments of a movie, and I think that there is a difference between like the way that a film like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre like bashes you over the head over and over again, and the way that this film doesn't. It just makes you stare at horses. It's very like, it feels to me more like I'm Alex in A Clockwork Orange and I have my eyes held open and I'm forced to stare at these horses for an hour and 40 minutes.
And I feel like I could easily have done with more horse footage because the horse footage is so uncanny. I like it. I love the sort of, again, that like floating slow motion quality just works on me. It works on me every single time it shows up in the film.
So, I mean, like when you were a kid, did your parents just like put on just slow motion horse videos and like, he loves these, you know?
I mean, we didn't have videos. There was not like the internet when I was a kid.
VHS? What are you talking about? That is video.
That is video. I don't know. I treasure movies that create that kind of lingering slowness. You've compared it multiple times now to slow cinema, and I'm sure that's exactly the same thing. Well, like even it was a throwaway in my Letterboxd review, and I wouldn't want to develop this because I think you could very easily make it sound bigger than it is. This movie is basically La Ventura with zombies, in that it starts with a weird sort of misshapen romantic triangle, and one of the leads like storms off, and we follow her for a bit, and then she's just not in the movie anymore, and the rest of the movie consists of people trying to figure out what happened to her. Now, obviously, there are differences. La Ventura, we don't know what happened to her. The characters never find out what happened to her. They eventually just kind of stop caring or looking for her. Here, it is resolved, and it's the point of the film is this mystery. But I do think it has that weirdly as one of its touchstones, because we do get this feeling that Virginia is going to be our main character until all of a sudden she's gone. And La Ventura is certainly a movie that makes a lot out of that same... We're just going to sit here, we're going to let the environment kind of happen around us, and we're just going to sort of feel that for a little bit. And now we're going to go on to the next place and probably have the same thing happen over again. And I don't know, that is something that absolutely works for me. I love that kind of slow walking tour feeling of movies.
Yeah, and that's fair. But here, I think the things that I would need to make that type of thing work are just not here. And that's not the movie's fault. That's not what it's in trying to do. But here, let me see. Like the scene of her poking around in the ruins. If it was her, walking through the Mannequin Factory and finding 8 different rooms that look completely different, but like have the same kind of tenor as the red light hallway, that is the kind of thing that would make me feel something. Sure. Or there is a sense of like uncanny, eerie slowness that, say, something like It Follows kind of captures, in the way that the monster in that movie is so implacable and so slow, but so determined. But I think that maybe has more, like, the effectiveness of that to me has more to do with the urgency of the people being chased down, or the idea that they don't know that this is coming. Like, it slowly appears behind them and starts to lurk. A lot of the horse scenes are presented kind of apropos of nothing, where it's like, here are just shots of people on horses in slow motion and not the thing that they are about to affect. So maybe there's just like a kind of inherent lack of urgency to what we're seeing that is just, it's so disconnected from anything that just my brain slides right off of it.
That's fair. I guess for me, like, the urgency is sort of taken as read. Because, like, well, we know that there are human characters who don't want to die, and we know that if the zombies catch them, they will die. And it's maybe more a pretext for me, but I mean, pretext, like, this thing is a pretext, but it doesn't actually make sense. It's sort of how I interface with so much of European horror that, like, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and
If the thing I want is the slow motion shots of horses. The movie gives them to me, and I'm fine with whatever excuse it used to bring them in.
Yeah, that's you, and that's great.
That's
I
me.
love you so much.
That's me.
Like
I don't feel loved.
Look, I read your Tombs of the Blind Dead review in 2009. Like that's true love. But anyway, so I think, it was a really grueling experience for me that then briefly turns into a very fun kind of Fulci zombie movie on a train for a while. And that I have no problem with.
The train sequence is great.
Yeah, like I would say,
the train sequence is really good.
The intensity and the kind of like needless cruelty of especially the scene where a child's mother is being devoured right above.
The other thing I specifically remember not being in the American cut.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Exactly.
But yeah, so the blood of the child's mother being splashed upon its face while being devoured, that is some good lurid horror shit.
Absolutely. That is really high level zombie movie imagery to me. Like, that reminds me very much of the scene in Night of the Living Dead where the little girl stabs one of her parents, I think it's her mother, to death with a trowel. Yeah,
I think so, because the dad continues to be an asshole for a while after that.
The dad continues to be an asshole for a while, as one would under such conditions. But yeah, we know that he saw this movie. It's one of the two things he specifically called out as being an influence on his film was Night of the Living Dead. So maybe he was even thinking in those terms when he created that moment.
Maybe. But yeah, no, it's definitely it's got that kind of evocative power. But it's in a way that like I don't think any of the like zombie attacks upon humans beforehand are effective in that way, or particularly gory or cruel or that interesting.
The movie backloads its gore. There is one earlier effect that I'd say is quite gory. It's a hand gets chopped off.
And in the flashback, there's a very close up shot of the sword entering the woman's chest, like above her breast, which is it's not a particularly good effect, but it's effective to watch.
It's very effective to watch. It's very strange and creepy and dreamy. I do think the goriness of it, the like sort of visceral reaction I have to it, is lessened by how extremely obviously it's not a real chest.
Yes.
It's like it is hella latex.
It is very, you can see the flaps pretty much.
Pretty much. But no, I do take your point. I do think that's a good sequence. But no, I mean you're correct that the train sequence is not doing something that happens elsewhere in the film.
Yes. And you know, the thing that it's doing is the thing that it wants to do, and I'm happy that it's making that happen. It's the same thing. Like maybe this is a good kind of way to read my taste. Is that I think Session 9 is one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Oh. We're
basically
how about that?
A good location and that kind of slow aesthetic is not the thing that works for me.
I get that.
But Tombs of the Blind Dead is considerably better than Session 9 because it doesn't have David Caruso's inexplicably horrible performance. Whenever...
Whereas
just whenever somebody tries to back up to me that I should love Session 9, I send them the clip of him going, "Fuck you."
I mean, I message heard and received. I will never try to sell you on the joys of Session 9. Which I believe to be fairly substantial joys.
And that's it. Having faith is really important to people, and I like that you have something to kind of hang that on.
Yes. No, I was going to say the way that people who care more about storytelling and character than I do will say the thing a movie needs is a script. If it doesn't have that, it won't work. If it does have that, it might come together despite everything. I feel that's the way I feel about a good location or set. It's like it doesn't really need anything else. As long as I like want to hang out and look at this space, I don't need anything else. And that is certainly how I get into Session 9.
Yeah. No, and I get that. I think it's just it's all about the way that we weight the components of a movie.
Right.
So to me, like, I really like some of the location work, and I like the general kind of aesthetic of this movie, but that just wasn't enough to to compensate for the lack of mostly anything, and even zombie mayhem. Like, I wasn't expecting a film from 1972 to be delivering, like, you know, beheadings and guts being pulled out and stuff like that, because that would have been a ridiculous ask of this movie. But it just wasn't delivering enough of the things that I like in this kind of movie.
That is
real. And there are movies that I like that have screenplay and character weighted really low. Again, like Suspiria, but Suspiria is just such an all-out, bonkers spectacle of a film that
sure.
there's that movie constantly has something going on. And I think I respond to maximalism more than I respond to minimalism.
I respond to both maximalism and minimalism. I just don't respond to anything between the two of them. I guess is where I'm at.
No, that's fair. You need to see RRR when you have a spare 3 hours.
I know. 3 hours is always a turn off.
Oh, yeah.
And also my understanding is that the version streaming on Netflix is in the wrong language.
Yeah.
So that's a bummer.
Yeah, I had to watch it on a streaming service that I had to pay for a 3 months of at once.
Because the language we want to watch it in is Bengali.
No,
correct?
Telugu.
Telugu, okay.
Yeah.
but it is Hindi on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a dub.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, anyway, sorry, that was an extreme tangent. But I'm done talking about Tomb of the Blind Dead.
I know you are.
What else do you want to talk about?
I'm sorry that you did not enjoy it.
No, me too. I never want to not enjoy a film.
I frequently want to not enjoy a film. I mean, we actually just had a conversation before we hit record about how much I'm hoping to not enjoy Persuasion.
Oh, that's true.
On Netflix.
Okay, well, that's a different thing, because there's something sickly enjoyable about not enjoying a film in that way. Like, look, I watched Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
I also watched Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
But yeah, but especially a film like this, I didn't want to have this reaction to it.
Oh, I get it.
But I just gotta be honest.
I take it that you will not be seeing any of the film's sequels.
Well, we'll see. In January, when we're doing our follow-ups for films that we covered earlier in the month, one of these might end up on the poll.
I'm just trying to think if any of them could possibly be more to your tastes. The fourth one might be more to your tastes, but probably not enough for you to like it.
Night of the Seagulls.
Night of the Seagulls.
Okay.
Which is much closer to a sort of standard issue, like Night of the Living Dead-esque, Under Siege by Zombies type movie.
Okay. I mean, look, me disliking Tombs of the Blind Dead to this degree is not a impediment to me watching 3 more Blind Dead films.
No, and I mean, as the guy who just finished watching all 16 Hellraisers, or not Hellraisers, I'm watching the Hellraisers, and some of them are not good. Witchcrafts is where I was going, all 16 Witchcrafts.
No, yeah, I've done the Children of the Corn. Like, I have committed myself to this lifestyle.
We are who we are. But I would not encourage you to watch any of the other Blind Deads.
It's certainly,
because I don't want you to suffer.
Yeah, that's a lower priority for me, because especially it is like in terms of the franchises that are remembered by people, it's like D tier.
I mean, I don't even know if it's really remembered by anyone other than like maybe me and a half dozen other people.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I will say the reason that I heard about this movie for the first time many years ago, I think it was like in 2006 or 2007, Blue Underground released a box set of the entire tetralogy in this very super cool coffin-shaped box.
That is cool.
And people loved this box, and it was like, ooh, it's a big deal. Like, there's these movies that were very, very... All 4 of them are owned by different distributors, so it took like years, apparently, of negotiation by Blue Underground to make this happen. The existence of this box was like a celebrated thing among horror fans in whatever year, again, 2006, 2007. And just the coolness of the box is sort of what caught my eye, and that's why I sought the films out. But there was a constituency for them, at least in 2006, and I assume there is still some sort of constituency now. I mean, the new film just got released on a very fancy Synapse Films Blu-ray, which is how I watched it. So people are still into at least the first one.
Yeah, which good for them. I'm happy for everyone. This is definitely not a movie. I'm glad I have recorded my thoughts on this movie so I don't have to watch it again.
I have already potentially committed to watching it twice more this calendar year.
For what reason?
Well, I want my boyfriend to see it. And although your response makes me wonder if maybe I don't want that.
Yeah, that might not be good for you.
And then my horror movie buddy, we are going to watch it over Halloween.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean...
Because I love this movie. This movie is like mother's milk.
Love is love is love. Your love is different from my love, but that doesn't make it any less valid.
Well.
All right, let's wrap up this episode before you fly to California and tear out my throat.
I'm not angry.
No, before you mount your horse and slowly ride over here.
Well, then you are not in any immediate risk.
Yeah, exactly. But yes. No, look. Yeah, no, we talked about it. It's done.
We talked about it. It's done. Just tastes. Tastes are tastes.
They are.
I like slow cinema, and you're apparently some sort of adrenaline junkie stimulation person.
Yeah, I like people walking at normal speeds. It's a real kind of... It's like bungee jumping.
I find that troublesome.
Anyway, yes, we don't actually have an official topic for next month, but it will be announced ahead of time on the Patreon poll. So if you're a part of the Patreon, you will know what we're talking about next month before it gets announced officially. And so keep an eye out for that. And just thank you for listening. If you liked Tombs of the Blind Dead, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm sure I'll hear about it.
Nah. I will never bring it up again. I would. This is one of those Midwestern nice things where I think I'm going to deal with it just by pretending that this conversation never happened.
Okay. Yep. Thank you so much for listening. Bye, everyone.
We're done. Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.